Right, so welcome everyone to this joint webinar between predominantly you'll be hearing from the Quality Assurance Agency and myself at the Nursing and Midwifery Council, talking very much about our approach and our changing approach to making approvals and major modifications. This is something we have all, I think, speak for us all in this room across the sector, been waiting for and really looking forward to hearing about today. So if you don't know me, my name is Sophia Hunt and I have the privilege of being the Head of Education and Quality Assurance here at the NMC. And I'm delighted to be joined today by colleagues who I will ask to just briefly introduce themselves before I kind of set the scene and get us kicked off on the content. So, Adam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Lovely, thank you, Sophia. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name's Adam Surtees. I'm Head of NMC Operations and Delivery at QAA.
Thank you, and I'm going to go to Kirsty next, please.
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. My name's Kirsty Davis, and I am the lead midwife for quality assurance, working at the Quality Assurance Agency.
Thanks, Kirsty. And last but not least, Natalie.
Thank you. My name's Natalie Robinson, and I am the lead nurse for quality assurance here at the Quality Assurance Agency.
Thank you very much. So, as I say, you're going to be hearing predominantly from my colleagues at the QAA about the outputs of what has been a really significant piece of work. I think they're going to start today by sharing with you some lessons learnt from the first year of the contract. And at that end of the first year, we put into place some working groups to actually look at that evaluative information and data, all of those different perspectives that we have seen and heard from the sector, and to put that forwards into some key learning. And since then, we've been squirreling tirelessly away in the background, very, very collaboratively to put forward this proposal to you today. Well, this new ways of working to you today. Proposal implies you can tell us no. So we are past the point of proposal. So to launch this to you today is a much better way of doing it. I will be staying on the call and we've got plenty of time, hopefully at the end, to answer any questions and things that you have. But without any further bumbled introduction, I will hand over to Natalie.
Thank you, Sophia. So as Sophia has identified, we're going to start today sharing with you just some of the broad themes in a you said we did kind of format as to how we've made these changes that we've been working on over the last over the previous months. We're going to look at the new launch of handbooks and what that will look like in terms of how we will present the handbooks to you. We have lots of questions from you about kind of what happens in the pre-quality assurance activity stage. And we're going to talk to you about some changes that we've made in response to your feedback. We're going to look at major modifications and new methods in relation to major modifications specifically based on the feedback that we've looked at. And we're going to look at reporting and agendas for your for the types of events that we will be working with you moving forward. So without further ado, we're going to start with the You Said We Did section of the presentation. So over, since we've taken over as the quality assurance service provider back in September 2024, you've given us lots of active feedback in various different forums and formats, and we've been actively listening to that and looking at ways that we can make this, we can transform our methods and some of our approaches, obviously in line with what we can do in terms of the framework and the order, but to listen to your feedback and make sure that we're responsive to that. So the changes that we're presenting to you today are based on the collection of that feedback. And like I say, that's come from lots of different forums and different types of evaluations on the activity that we've done to date. So one of the things that you've been really clear with us about is around the timelines for activity in the handbook. We have lots of questions around that not being as clear as it could be, and then it's been difficult to decipher when you're putting your dates in for requests and trying to work back. Obviously, we recognise those really important steps for you as an AEI in that process, and we wanted to make sure that that was much clearer for you. So what we've done is separated out specifically the pre-quality assurance activity so that you can work back specifically on the AEI actions that you have in terms of your quality assurance activity, so that you can work back from your programme start date a little easier. We've broken that up into different methods for you. You know, you've shared feedback with us around it all being compiled into kind of one timeline at the moment in our current handbook, and therefore we've broken that up. We've also made the reporting much clearer for you so that you can see that nice and clear in the handbook. You've also fed back to us that it's difficult to understand the differences in the processes for modifications and approvals, and what the nuances are in terms of if you were going for a programme approval or a major modification of a programme that you're already approved for. And again, we recognise in our previously published handbook, we had this all kind of collated into one timeline for you, and that you would have to try and decipher kind of, well, that's for programme approval, that's for a major modification. So what we've done is we've separated the handbooks out on this to make this clearer. So we'll be launching several handbooks to you so that if you're going through a programme approval or institutional approval or an endorsement, you have a very clear handbook. And then if you're going through a major modification, you have a clear handbook that identifies exactly what it is that you need to do for that. We've had lots of feedback around the proportionate feel of modifications, and we know that at the NMC EdQA conferences last year, we talked about that collectively together, and some of you have fed back that your modifications felt like an approval visit. I'm sure you'll appreciate that the scale and scope of major modifications is quite broad in terms of what it is that you plan to do. Some of these changes might be bigger than others. And because of that, we've created new proportionate methods for major modifications, which we will talk to you about in detail as the presentation moves forward. The other feedback that we've had from you is that you kind of feel well sighted as to what happens up until your event, up until your visit, when your activity's taken place. But you weren't kind of sure what happened after that, and the timings weren't clear. You might have felt that you had to kind of ask questions around when your report would be published, things like that. So we've made this much clearer in the handbook, specifically around reporting, but also making it much clearer to you about the observation period and the regulatory processes and timelines that take place after your report is submitted. We get lots of questions and feedback around scheduling and what happens after we put your request in. So we will be launching a calendar which clearly shows the scheduling windows in the academic year and when you'll expect to see a response from your request when it goes in. We've had feedback around the inconsistency in the classification of modifications, so there not being a consistent approach to the application of major modifications. And based on that, we've created a decision matrix to screen all modifications so that we make sure that anybody internally that's dealing with that advice is using the same tool to screen your modifications, obviously taking into account their professional judgment, and there will be nuances in that as well in terms of how we use that matrix. You've also shared with us that you didn't feel that visitor teams were always proportionate to the changes that you were making. And because of that, we've made some changes to the visitor team composition, specifically for major modifications and how we might assess them moving forward. In terms of the handbooks, we'll be launching 4 handbooks moving forward. So these will be the handbook for institutional approval, programme approval and programme endorsement, the handbook for major modifications, a handbook for monitoring visits and a handbook for extraordinary review assessments. We will be having a separate launch for monitoring, so we'll talk to that. We'll talk to that separately at another date. We'll be launching that to you later on. But today, specifically, the changes that we're going to talk about is the changes that we've made to institutional approvals, programme approvals, endorsements, and major modifications. But moving forward, when you log onto our website in the coming weeks, you will see a change in the way that our website is formatted, and you will be able to easily navigate as to, I'm going through a major modification, I'll click here, and this is where the handbook for that is located. You'll be able to see our calendar visibly there. So those changes will be coming in the coming weeks for you to make this easier for you to navigate moving forward. So we move on now to the pre-quality assurance, and we're going to talk about screening and scheduling, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kirsty Davis for this section.
Thank you, Natalie. So yes, as Natalie has alluded to, we've spent some time looking at the pre-quality assurance requirements, how we get to that point of scheduling your visit, and that has two components. Looking at when you make your request, so how we can help and support with defining core windows for scheduling that will become clear in the calendar that's published on the website. So we're looking at, based on programme start date or planning for implementation of any changes to programme start date, how we plan that activity and give you a calendar to work back from and think when that request needs to come in. Included in that planning activity and thinking about those start dates, we've made much more reference to and clarity in regard to the observation period and that period of regulatory decision making that our colleagues from the NMC need to make, so that you're fully aware of the absolute timelines in order to meet with the requirements for your proposed or planned start date. Going to very much look at the requests that come through in QA Link and look at that front loading, that screening, look at the standards that might be in scope in order to help utilize the decision matrix in order to plan the correct type of modification or plan the approval event. Modifications that are proposed through QA Link, we are planning to offer a meeting with either myself or Natalie as lead nurse and midwife to look at that event and that screening process and have conversations about the standards that are in scope. And that gives us then the full information in order to utilise the decision-making matrix to look at the event type and then therefore the composition, that proportionate composition of visitor teams for the appropriate modification that's to be undertaken. To move on, Natalie. A little bit of an ask from us is that programme titles in QA Link are really very, very important, and we do see a lot of requests for changing those titles. It's really important that as you submit that request, you're looking and clarifying the programme titles, the academic routes and those qualification routes, and that they're listed exactly as your request relates to exactly as they will be listed on the NMC website. If you think that they're not correct and you'd like to formally request to change them, then please do contact your NMC regional officers via the regional mailboxes as soon as possible, because we work with the approved titles that are within QA Link in order to progress any approvals or modifications. Thank you, Natalie. Timelines. The timelines that we're working on now with this more proportionate approach will align to meet and ensure that the full quality assurance process is undertaken in order to meet your start date. We will build into those timelines any additional times that might be needed to meet any conditions or requirements that are asked from the event. And this does lengthen that process. So we want to be very clear that the timeline we're offering will still give you that opportunity to meet the requirements within the window prior to the start date. So please be aware when submitting those requests, we are building in all of the quality assurance processes from the receipt of the request to scheduling the timeline and inclusion of that calendar month observation period, which is determined in the order. And after the observation period, there's a 30 working day opportunity, or 30 working days for our NMC colleagues to complete the regulatory processes in order to conclude the approval or modification. Thanks, Natalie. We've spoken about the decision-making matrix and thinking about the standards that relate to the specific modification that's requested. So we've put together some core questions that we will utilise when considering the QA link request that you've submitted, and when we're having discussions based on that QA link request in order to determine the most appropriate event type, consideration to and to determine that appropriate proportionality with that equitable approach. We will be offering meetings to AEIs where we need more clarity in relation to that request, and where we can have an open discussion, supportive discussion in relation to the standards that would be impacted and therefore in scope for major modification activity. Once we've had those discussions and we've had an opportunity to fully appraise the request with the decision-making matrix, iron out any questions we might have, or we may need to have further conversations with our colleagues at the NMC in more complex cases, we'll then schedule the request on the most appropriate timeline for the most appropriate event type, and allocate or appoint a visitor team with that due regard in mind that's required. Thanks, Natalie. I'm going to hand over to Adam, and he's going to talk a little bit more about those event types.
Lovely, thank you, Kirsty. Yeah, so I'm going to focus particularly on major modifications here and the work that we've done. And obviously, colleagues have alluded to the collaboration with the NMC, the feedback from yourselves as AEIs, visitors, even our internal team as well in terms of the developments. And some of the key aspects for major modifications going forward, noting that that is a significant volume of the review activity we undertake at QAA, is identifying several factors really. Is one, looking at the type of modification that AEI is going to present as a request and where that fits, but looking at actually the efficiencies and the types that we need to be able to do to ensure that they're proportionate. So everything we've looked at is looking at the efficiency, the effectiveness, but with proportionality. So while I'm only focusing on major modifications, there is to note that obviously there has been changes to the approvals handbook for both approvals and institutional approvals. But broadly, that remains the same in terms of process, whereas there are some changes to timelines that you'll see when they're published in due course. But if I move on to the next slide, please, Nat, and then talk about the three aspects of major modifications. There's one missing. That's it. Yeah, so we've got three parts of major modifications to consider. One will look very similar to what you do currently, and this is the quality assurance visit. And with this one, we envisage this really being either on site or online, which is currently what we undertake as a major modification visit with you, and typically 1 or 2 days. A 1-day visit is the standard, but where a practice learning visit is included, that's where we tend to see it then move to 2 days. In terms of the gateways, this consists of the gateway for evidence through gateway 3 and then gateway 4 for the visit. We are still expecting and asking that this is conducted as a conjoint panel. This is something that was in the previous guidance and will be following through as part of this, and that will be comprising of a chair and a panel that is members from the institution that are identified and put together by yourself as the AEI. The key development here for us is actually, again, this is the efficiency, and the aspect we looked at is the time frame and actually reducing that. And this was something that was really important, noting the number of reviews we were expected to receive, but also noting your start dates and the weeks that you need to organize this, the internal mechanisms you have for validation events, pulling that panel together, and actually looking at when this can be completed to make sure all the internal factors then can operate ready for your proposed start date. So we've been able to reduce that overall timeline as well. And that was a really important aspect, and some important work that went on between QAA and NMC colleagues to look at the efficiencies and the effectiveness while still being able to deliver a robust quality assurance method. So as I say, that one broadly remains the same apart from a revision of the timeline. Next slide, please. This brings us on to we've got two new aspects that you'd have seen on the first slide under major modifications. This brings us on to the engagement event. So again, conversations based on everything we'd learned about how can we improve and deliver and be proportionate to the type of major modification requests that are being received. And this was the idea of designing a different variation. So previously you'd have been aware of utilising, as we've just talked about, the quality assurance visit, which entirely can be on site or online. We also then had the desktop, which was the other variation that we'd utilise for that. But there's an area within this that we can actually see there's a scope to look at different events and different timelines depending on the modification you're requesting. So again, with the engagement event, this still is working through gateways 3 and 4. It talks about there typically the type of major modification in terms of the smaller changes. We've talked about through the risk matrix Kirsty noted, that's all part of the screening and the work of standards in scope that will determine the type of event you have. And that's where the engagement event will be discussed, figured, and then assigned based on the matrix. And the key difference here is Gateway 4 consists then on an online event, which is between the visitor team, any key stakeholders they wish to meet at your AEI, and typically we anticipate this not lasting longer than half a day. So again, this is trying to reduce the impact and the burden on yourselves depending on what is required by the team. And with the engagement events, we envisage they potentially won't be conjoint, but we want to leave that as optional because it may be part of your revalidation or work with internally that we do leave that as an option that can be discussed at the screening and then subsequently with your officer once the request is assigned. And again, we're looking at the timeline, you can see that's a reduced timeline to what you would have been used to previously in terms of all major modifications. So again, it's thinking about the proportionality and having the variation of different events to suit that. If we move on to the last one, and the last one then is a panel. So again, we have the three settings for the major modification events that could be offered as part of the new method. It follows the same principles of gateways 3 and 4. Again, for this one, this is all part of the risk matrix, and we'd expect this to be convened for really smaller changes. Where it notes there where only a small number of standards are impacted by that change. Again, all this is part of the information gathered by not only the request you submit, but also by the screening and the time that you spend with our lead nurse and our lead midwife. And it consists, this one again is an online meeting between the visitors and key individuals, expected to be and anticipated from either your program or stroke practice team. And again, typically lasting no longer than 2 hours. Again, this will be organised dependent on what you need. And again, this is looking at the level of risk associated with the modification to the approval decision and the recommend to approval decision from the visitors to how much time we need to place on the burden. All of these still require the evidence being uploaded to QA Link and ensuring that we cover everything you need to in terms of the program standards under Gateway 3. This one, to note, panels are not expected to be a conjoint method because of the nature of the type of activity, the length of activity, etc. And again, you can see from the time frame that this is a slightly shorter timeline than the engagement event, but it's actually, again, in comparison to the actual visits, in comparison to the previous timelines that we operate, we have been able to reduce and identify efficiencies for each of those. I think that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm now going to talk to you about visitor teams and their team composition. And the first thing that we're excited to share with you is around student visitors. So moving forward, we will be introducing student visitors to programme approvals and institutional approvals. And they will be an active participating member of the team. We're really excited to launch this. So this is a practice that QAA, as the Quality Assurance Agency, has across the agency and other review methods that it leads on. And we're excited to bring this to our NMC methods moving forward. The purpose of the position is for student visitors to be an active part of the review team. So they will contribute to the review as a lay visitor ward and as a registrant visitor ward. And they will be part of those outcomes and recommendations to the NMC for approval of educational institutions and programmes. We do have a criteria around student visitors and what constitutes a student visitor, and I'll give a rationale for this once I've introduced it. But we do, the student visitors that we've recruited are on the NMC register, so they're either registered as a nurse, midwife, or nursing associate with the NMC, but the currency of that is within the last 3 years. And we also have registered nurse or midwife who's completed an NMC approved postgraduate programme in the last 3 years. The reason for the registration element of student visitors is, again, in consultation with our NMC colleagues around that, and that is a QAA-wide decision that we do look for that currency. So we know that a lot of our students are focused on their programme and seeking their registration, and we do need to think about the requirements of our visitor team and the ask that we have of them during the quality assurance process. We do across QAA use the 3-year currency rule, we could call it, in terms of the fact that we do make sure that that study is current within the last 3 years. However, we do then think about if that newly registered nurse or midwife then goes on to look at further NMC approved study, whether we can retain them in the pool with that currency. And that leads us on to the role that those visitors will be looking at in terms of the lens of the visitor team. And again, this is something that you have given us feedback across the last 18 months around the lens of the visitor. And this has prompted us to refresh this within the handbooks. And we've also been addressing this through visitor training as well. So if we think of the different lenses of visitors that we have, so we have the registrant visitor, so those who are currently on the register with no restrictions in practice in nursing midwifery or nursing associate. Registrants are assigned to QA activity in which they have due regard, and they're on the relevant part of the register or have a recorded qualification specific to that review. And registrant visitors use their knowledge as a registrant and their experience to actively participate in the approval process by ensuring that their registration and due regard is contributing to that process. When we think about our lay visitors, so lay visitors are members of the public that do not hold any registration with the NMC, and the lay visitor role is in assuring as a member of the public, so making sure that the public, patient and people who use services and the carers are at the centre of what we do in our quality assurance activity. And then in the introduction of the student visitor, like I say, they will have completed an NMC approved qualification within the last 3 years, and the student visitor is to represent the student voice. Now, we know that many of you have student representations on your panels, so we're really excited to bring this voice to the quality, to the review team in the quality assurance process. So they will work alongside registrant visitors and lay visitors to ensure that students are empowered and supported during any quality assurance activity. So we'll be excited to launch that to you in approvals and institutional approvals moving forward. We have really reviewed your feedback around visitor team composition and the size. And as we've been progressing through the contract in the last 18 months, we've been looking about what that looks like in terms of major modifications. So there will be some proportionality applied, and you can see that in the methods in terms of our panels and our engagement events, and making sure that we have the right size visitor team for that. So the most appropriate team for the event type will be assigned, and that very much looks at that decision matrix that we talked about earlier, and thinking about the type of modification that you have, whilst of course ensuring that we consider due regard as per the order. So we will be working with you, and that we will, like we say, we'll be screening to get more information from you from the beginning so that we can make sure that we've scheduled that appropriately for you. And programme approvals will now include a student visitor, and institutional approvals will now include a student visitor. And the composition with registrant visitor and lay visitor for programme and institutional approvals remains the same. And as we said, all teams will ensure that we consider due regard. So the other part of the team that we wanted to bring to you today in terms of a change that we have already implemented, and many of you will have been party to this, but if you can remember right back to the beginning of the contract, which I know that seems quite a while ago now, we didn't always have quality officers at the actual assurance visits and events. We did make a change pretty quickly to allow quality officers to attend those events, and now it will be wrote into our new handbooks and guidance moving forwards that the QAA quality officer will normally attend those events. The officer role is a guide and support role, so they guide and support the process of quality assurance, and they act as the interface between the AEI and the visitor team. And the officer ensures that there is a consistent approach to that process. We've had lots of positive feedback about the officer role, particularly from AEIs, but also from our visitor teams as well, and how that interface has been a real positive contribution to the processes that we've put in place, and therefore we hope that, making sure that this is nice and visible in our handbook, that they'll normally attend these visits, will be well received moving forward. So thinking about reporting now, we've had lots of feedback around reporting and our process for reporting, when you get factual accuracy, what happens after factual accuracy. We've really listened to that feedback, and we've tried to really make this clear in our handbook in the timelines. When you see the timelines in the handbook, they will be formatted in beautiful flowcharts, but we've got them outlined in a table for you here so that you can see. So we've separated it out for you with reporting with no conditions and reporting with conditions. So you can see that activity here around what that process looks like. And this makes it much more visible for you in terms of what happens after your report is uploaded to QA Link. So once your report is uploaded to QA Link, you do commence the formal observation period of 1 calendar month. And following that closure of the observation period, that then triggers NMC regulatory processes, and they follow a 30 working day process following the closure of the observation period. We've made that really clear within the timelines to support you in planning your activity, so that we can be really clear and transparent around that and what happens after your factual accuracy check. The visitor team reviews it, and the final report checks that we have. So probably what wasn't very visible when we last launched to you was around the robust internal quality assurance that then happens in relation to your report, in terms of going through moderation and factual accuracy, and those final report checks that we do prior to upload. So we've tried to make that really visible in terms of weeks for you, so that you can see when that will take place after your scheduled activity. In the new handbooks, this is all outlined with all of the specific methods as well, so you can see it outlined in weeks compared across the different methods that we'll be using. We've also separated it out as to what this would look like when you have conditions as well. So we have some guidance around the length of time to complete conditions in the handbook and what we would recommend, but we also recognise that, it's particularly in relation to conjoint events, that these are conjointly agreed by the panel, and that they might be dictated to you by your own institutional processes as well, for example. So we can't dictate a specific time. We can recommend. So what we've done is we've made it nice and clear within the handbook as to what happens post submission of your conditions being met. So you'll see there that we say within the agreed time frame for the conditions to be met. and then what happens post the submission of condition response and evidence for you. So again, making that much nicer and transparent and clear for you in the handbooks as to what would happen in those instances. The next thing that we're really excited to launch is areas of future monitoring. So you'll notice in terms of the reports that we have at the moment, if you've been through the process with us, you know, we have conditions, recommendations and areas of good practice. We will be adding an additional criteria to that in the term of areas for future monitoring. So the visitors might now also suggest areas for future monitoring that identify specific areas that may be used for the NMC monitoring purposes and in the future, for example, for new programme monitoring or through the ASR or a monitoring visit. So there'll be detailed information on that in the handbook of what you can expect, and our report templates will change to reflect that. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsty again. She's going to talk to you about visit agendas and practice learning visits.
So thank you, Natalie. Yes, in addition to all of the changes we've talked about, we've also thought more carefully about those indicative agendas. They need to be nuanced depending on the type of event that's scheduled and depending on perhaps the lines of inquiry that have been identified, and giving some clearer guidance as to when the visitor team will be consulting with sharing information about how to plan that agenda. And the QAA officer will be that interface, that liaison between the visitor team and AEIs in order to finalise that agenda ahead of the event. We're looking at some differentiation of the practice learning staff, senior staff and practice learning assessors and supervisors that we've given more clarity on, and more guidance in relation to practice learning visits. We've had feedback and recognised that there needed to be more structure and clearer planning for those in these agendas for the events. So hopefully that will give you a better idea of how the days will run, what they look like, and who needs to be in which place at what time, which is always fun, isn't it? So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of the changes that we will be launching in the handbooks in the coming weeks. And that concludes our slides. So if Natalie moves on one more, we can open the floor to questions and comments. We will do our best to answer them. I will be making some notes and trying to collate this into a frequently asked questions document to go alongside this launch webinar. So over to you.
I will just stop sharing so that I can see you all when you're asking questions, if that's okay. We've got a question from Jackie first. I think
it might have been set up, Natalie, so that because we're recording it for external purposes, that microphones may not turn on easily. However, I have noticed that some colleagues have spotted the Q&A function and have been putting questions in there. So while I take a look at whether or not we can adjust the settings.
I have been unmuted, so thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Good afternoon all. Thank you very much. Just a question really. We've put in a request for a major modification. How long is it before we get the information as to whether we've got a date or not that we've put that request in for? Because we're still waiting, and obviously that will impact on our timelines in terms of developments.
I can pick that one up. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I mean, as we've now launched this, we've actually held on to some of the pending requests that have come in over the last couple of months on the basis of this launch, because actually having assigned and looked at the risk matrix with some of the requests we've received, we now know where they sit with the new major modifications. So over the course of the next week, I will be actively informing all AEIs that have a request in with us with that are pending, that have been submitted, of the type of event you expect, and then the time frame and the timeline. And again, what we're aiming to do now, because we're pre-planning that we're able to do in this year and going forward, is aiming to absolutely ensure that the visit date that you selected is kept and utilised as best we can. If there is a need to change, we'll obviously discuss that with you in advance. But within the coming weeks, so in the next 1 to 2 weeks, I will be contacting all AEIs that sit on our with the requests that have been pending to notify them of the event based on decisions that have been made at QA and NMC.
Thank you very much, Adam. That's great.
And just to kind of say on that point as well, that hopefully that will be much clearer to you moving forward as well with the calendar in terms of when you will expect a response from scheduling. So we'll be putting in quite clear timelines on our published calendar as to when you'll expect a response from that. I have just been going through the chat, but the next person I've got a hand up with is Andrew.
I think it's me. It's Lucy Warren. I was
Lucy,
number one.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I've been unmuted, so I think whoever's working wonders behind the scenes and unmuting is doing a great job. Well done, Sophia. So my name's Lucy Warren. I'm from Cardiff University. I just wanted to double check something really. Within our school, we are proposing that we're going to have some, what I suspect are major modifications across our 3 nursing fields and midwifery. We were thinking that we're going to be putting this all in together at the same time. Does that make sense?
As one request, Lucy?
Not as one request, because they're different to each one, but we were thinking we'd do it all in one go, because it's all one institution, because that would seem to be a big bang approach, would seem to be sensible. Does that make sense? I just want to double check if that is what the preferred thing is for QAA.
From my perspective, yes. I mean, sorry to jump. Yeah, I realised I've been re-muted as I should have done myself. So apologies I didn't do that, colleagues. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really important, again, for what you're doing internally to make that work for you, and then we'll make sure we can schedule again. We won't know until we receive the requests the type of modification event they will be. And again, what we will do internally and alongside colleagues with the NMC is ensure that we get the right level of efficiency in terms of the scheduling of those events as well. So if you have them ready and they are to come in, I mean, the only thing I'd be slightly cautious of, it sounds like they all have the same start date. If they do have differing start dates, that may impact some of the scheduling in terms of priority is always going to be to those start dates that are closest to us. We will aim to schedule as early as possible, but obviously if you were to put in a January or 2028 request, for instance, September 28 request, that we've got to bear in mind all the other requests that are going to come in for that, but we try and plan for that. So I have no issue with you submitting that as a collective, if that's more helpful.
That's great, thank you. Yes, it's all going to be the same start date, so that's brilliant. Thank you.
I'm not sure my hands are appearing in the same order as everybody else.
Natalie, shall I hop in? Yeah. You have Andrew next, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation today, which has been really interesting to see. Just a thank you for responding to the feedback that you received from us. If I'm reading the slides on reporting, actually having visibility of that timeline post the approval is really helpful, and it looks as though it's a period now of about 4 months, for example, for a modification without conditions, and obviously it'll be longer for the modification with conditions. Yeah, just to say thank you for that. Can we have that up front in big bold letters in the guidance, please, to like the overall period? So obviously, depending on the event, of the length of the particular request, we need that for each type of event, so that we can forward plan and make sure that we get the requests into you. So, and just to acknowledge, yeah, thank you very much really for taking on our feedback and looking at the process to hopefully bring that timeline down a little bit.
Thanks, Andrew. We have made it visible within the handbooks. So we have split all of the different event types out so that you can see, and we've split that into pre-quality assurance activity, quality assurance activity, and reporting. I can see Sophia's coming in here, so I'll bring Sophia in as well.
Thank you, and thanks for the feedback as well, Andrew. We really appreciate that positivity in there. The regulatory side of the processes that take place after the report is finalised are and have not actually changed within there. You're right in noting that it is the clarity surrounding this that is so important for colleagues. Obviously, an institution never wants conditions, but we need to factor them in, and the fact that there would be a limited amount of time for conditions to be met has come through in the feedback in order for that institution to achieve its planned start date. So we've asked the QAA from the NMC to be really tight on that so that you're not setting any unrealistic expectations. And I think it's right and proper that the QAA have taken that feedback forward, and I'm very grateful to them for doing so. The bit that we cannot amend within that timeline is, of course, the observations period. You must, under the nursing and midwifery order, have 1 calendar month available to you during which to submit observations to us. However, should the institution not wish to make any observations, so you purposefully close the observation period before that calendar month, or you submit the observations sooner within that 1 calendar month, we at the NMC do not sit and wait for that clock to tick down. It's only if we hear nothing from the institution through the QA link that full month needs to be there. So whenever the institution closes the observations period, either through submitting observations or telling us you don't have any, it goes into the up to 30 working days of regulatory process. And we need that up to 30 working days in case we need to call an extraordinary QA board to, or wait for a routine board, of course, to go through in depth some recommendations, conditions, etc. within review. So in order to get people their letter comfortably without them feeling like they need to chase through various colleagues and through the system to get that letter in their hand of approval of changes, we've been really transparent about that there is a lot that goes on once the event is done. The visitors do not make that decision. It is the start of a secondary process for the QAA and for ourselves at the NMC. So it's fantastic that that's being acknowledged, and thank you for drawing attention to it today.
Sorry, can I just very quickly come in and add to Andrew's point about the timelines? And this will obviously hopefully benefit all colleagues on the call when planning. Is Natalie alluded to a calendar, an academic calendar that we will produce as well, that will highlight across all of the 3 major modification types what that looks like across an academic year in terms of you planning your start date, what the event looks like when it begins, when that first gateway 3 would be open, for instance. So you'll be able to actively see, and that factors in everything Sophia's just talked about in terms of the conditions, the timeframes for the observation period, and the regulatory decision making. So you will have a full scope and suite of understanding of the activity and the time it takes to undertake that when you're planning ahead, and that will be also published alongside the handbooks in the coming weeks.
Thank you. I think I have Martina next.
Oh, thank you very much. It's Martina O'Brien from Brunel University. I was just wondering, I know the NMC's out for consultation on practice hours. So if practice hours were reduced and a university is kind of halfway through all the programme approval processes, or even has recently, got their course approved and the hours change, can we make modifications sort of during the modification processes then?
We do have a question about this in the chat as well. Sophia, I'm gonna hand this question to you if that's okay, around the consultation, because that's NMC led.
Yes, of course. So many colleagues know from the council papers and wider discussions within the sector that we are undertaking the practice learning review and consulting on a number of areas. But of course, we do not know at this stage how that consultation will go and whether or not any or multiple changes will be brought in, and all of that will be made very clear. Now, as part of that practice learning review process, we are, of course, looking internally at the NMC at scenario planning, potential outcomes and what that would mean. What I would say at this stage is it is too soon for us to know what the scale, if any, changes are going to be introduced. So we would not encourage AEIs to change their behaviour based on what might be, and would have a period of introduction, and obviously of whatever those changes are would all be communicated, as well as what the expected modification method would be to introduce and implement those changes. So what I would say is, if you are looking at an existing application or a future application to make enhancements to your student experience, to strengthen any aspect of your curriculum, making it more contemporary, making it more effective and efficient for your organisation, please do not put off making those changes because something might be coming up along the way. We would, of course, have open dialogue and share with you our thinking when we have that clarity. But for now, it's business as usual, and I would encourage you not to try to factor in things that may or may not obviously come to fruition. We can never prejudge a consultation or a council decision. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then I have Rachel.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rachel Jockey from the University of Sheffield. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind, only because you're here and you're captive audience. That's great. And it's really interesting. I think it's really good to hear about the streamlining of these processes, because obviously the change in sort of modifying body as well hasn't helped, has it, in that crossover? And I think it's been, the waters have been quite muddied. So I think having this new streamlined process will be hopefully a lot clearer for institutions. I've just got two questions, really, if you don't mind. And one is around timelines. Again, these don't, well, they're both around timelines really, but the first one is around, we had a major mod in October of last year for our SNA apprenticeship, and there was one condition, and the report was and the conditions were submitted in December of last year. We then had until January the 18th to comment on the report. So we commented back by the 11th of January. We still haven't had any feedback whatsoever. And I'm getting a lot of pushback from my institution because they want to advertise the programme. Now, I know we can advertise pending approval, but because it's an apprenticeship programme, they want to recruit to it. So just wondering, I'm trying to put them off and say, hopefully it'll be the next couple of weeks, but is that, do you think that's likely? Am I sort of barking at the wrong tree?
Rachel, I think we could probably liaise with you separately, and just I wouldn't want to comment on your, without looking at all of the information provided, I wouldn't want to comment, but I will make a note for myself and we'll reach out to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be really great, because I tried to contact the officer that was working and haven't had any feedback, haven't had any contact response from them. So I don't know if they're still on the case. So that'd be really great.
We'll look into that for you.
Thank you. And then my second one was just around the timelines, was around something that Adam said around, because I'm having to put in a major modification for the midwifery programme that I am programme lead for at the moment. And the way my institution works is they have to have a 2-year lead-in for any programs, which means that if I can't offer it before September 28 because it's got to take at least 2 years for the university to be able to sort of get their heads around that. And obviously, because it's a conjoined visit, it means that I've had to request a September 26 visit. Now, going on what you've just said, Adam, I will be a bit alarmed if you're thinking, well, you're not starting, you don't want to run it until September 28. Actually, we'll put you off, because actually, if we put it off, we can't have a conjoined event, because then we can't advertise it. Sorry, it's my phone now. So it was just if that's the case, is there any way of us? So, for example, Adam, if you reviewed the paperwork and said, oh, we're going to offer you a visit in March 27, an approval event, in a modification event in March 27, is there a way of us communicating back and saying, actually, that wouldn't work? Sorry, that was very complicated.
No, that's, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, the scheduling and the volume is something we have to manage and look at, and we completely understand from yourselves, your individual AEIs, so you've got a lot of internal mechanisms to focus on. In terms of the scheduling that far advanced, then if there are specifics that are particular in terms of how things operate with you, then we consider that. I don't want to rule out absolutely entirely not submitting requests in terms of how things need to be managed internally, and we won't rule that out. What we'll always do is ensure to have a conversation. I will want to schedule going forward as we receive the requests, but we do have to have consideration for that, the timeliness in terms of the time that's set forward. I don't know if Sophia wants to comment in terms of if there is how far in advance the NMC would expect a request to be in terms of an actual start date, if there's anything there that needs to be picked up on.
So we do have a phrase that we don't normally approve anything that is for delivery more than a year in advance, because of course of a lot can change in a year, as we've just been talking about actually with the practice learning review. However, that does not mean institutions cannot. The normally is there as a cautionary aspect, and as we have discussed, Rachel, there are really unique circumstances, and we are always willing to hear the human aspect and to this is not about the computer says no. We will work with institutions, not against them, to create that shared understanding and an appropriate plan forwards.
Brilliant, thank you. That was really helpful on both questions. Thank you so much.
I have Beverly next.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, Sophia. Nice to see you again, although you can't actually see my face, so you might not know who I am. So I've got a couple of questions, and the first one is I'm following on from Lucy's question initially, where we're going to submit a notification for midwifery, the 3 undergraduate nursing programmes and independent prescribing. And because they all sit on 3 different parts of the register, is it likely that we would need 3 separate events for those? And if that's the case, I've had a look at the notification form, and the last thing it asks for is dates, and it asks for 3 potential dates. Would we then submit a date for each of those elements that would sit on different parts of the register? So a date for undergraduate nursing, a date for midwifery, and a date for independent prescribing?
It's falling to me again. I think Sophia's jumping in. Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is a really good example, Beverly, of why the team here at the QAA are wanting to strengthen the upfront opportunities for AEIs to get that advice and guidance, and that before you submit a request, you are welcome to meet with one or more of my lovely learned colleagues here today, and if necessary, they quite often get myself or a member of my team along as well, so that we are all consistent in the decision making and the messaging, to really look at what is the appropriate event style and type and panel composition for you, because actually, you know, this is NMC resources. We want to make sure it is effective and efficient, so that you get the right due consideration level for the changes that you're looking to make. So this piece that the team have spoken about the real screening of what you want to do and the giving you advice and guidance about what is realistic, achievable, is incredibly important, and for me a real strength of the new approach that the QAA are going to be taking. They've been trialing it, they've been doing absolutely their best, but to do this as a universal offer, I think is a real step forward, and I hope you will give me some feedback on it, Beverly. It's lovely to hear you today.
Thanks, Sophia. I think that a meeting would probably be helpful before we submit that report, because once you start looking at more than one programme, it becomes incredibly complex. Amazing. Thank you very much indeed.
Great.
And I next have Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone, and thank you for putting this on today. It's been really helpful. So our institution has just done its pre-reg major modification, and now we're looking at our post graduate pre-reg registration. Natalie, I know we've met with Adam already, and I know I've written in the chat. I'm just a bit confused by the response. I just want to clarify that it's what I think it is. So my question was that if we're doing a postgraduate major modification, the student visitor, is there a guarantee that they will have done some sort of postgraduate nursing? Because if not, they could sit there and say that the course isn't fair and just because they don't understand the nuances that we know exist in that postgraduate course.
Yeah, Sophia's gonna jump in here and then I'll come in after Sophia.
Thank you. So the first point to be really clear on is that student visitors won't be involved in major modifications of programmes at all. That will remain either registrant visitors or registrant and lay visitors to look at the public perspective angle. Where student visitors are going to be involved in a new approval, and that may include post-registration provision as well as pre-registration provision, the training for that student visitor is very bespoke. It is not about them coming to bring their own experiences to the table. It is there for them to look at things from the angle of the student. So when they go through things like your programme handbook, you know, what is the student perspective on that? Because those of us who have been in academic roles for a long time, as registrant visitors or lay visitors, myself, I was a lay visitor for many years, we look at it through that lens of how does this support public safety, how does this support public perceptions, how are the public being involved in the design and the delivery of this programme to ensure it creates a nurse midwife who the public want to see with the right values and behaviours and knowledge. So the student visitor will very much be bringing a lens to the review. They are a part of the team. They are not a sole decision maker, but it is really important to us at the NMC that they are current registrants, so they are held to the code around confidentiality and the way in which that they engage with your own students, your own stakeholders. But just the same as with any other visitor, lay or registrant, if there are any concerns about the behaviour or conduct of a visitor, they will be heard and acted upon. All right, hopefully that's useful.
I'm going to say a similar thing to Sophia. Does that answer your question, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. I missed the bit earlier when you said not in major modifications. So yeah, it's mostly, I think because we've got so many sort of strings to our bow, we probably wouldn't be involved in many programme approvals or institutional approvals anyway. Most of ours are major modifications. Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much.
Sorry if I wasn't clear in answering your question in the chat, Charlotte.
That's fine. It's all good. It's worth clarifying. I'm glad I did. Thank you.
I have been moving through the Q&A in the chat to try and answer people's questions. but does anybody want to put their hands up and share anything that I've not managed to answer?
As far as I can see, everybody's question has been answered, but yes, please do jump in.
Emma. Oh, Emma's.
I've allowed Emma's mic.
Hello, thank you. My name's Emma. I'm from the University of Hull. We are just in the process of hopefully starting an apprenticeship programme. So we're currently going through the approvals process. We have been supplied with details of our panel. Now, you've mentioned student visitors will begin attending panels. So if we've not already got them details, when we'll get them supplied, please.
So if you've had your panel, there'll be no changes to your panel, Emma. So your panel is as stands.
Thank you very much.
Your visitor team.
Thank you. So it's just for new ones going forward, not existing.
Scheduling moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying.
That's okay. And Claire, you've put your hands up as well.
Claire, I've got your mic
Yep,
sorted.
Sorry, yep, sorry, I can see now. I was waiting for it to change. Yeah, it's really to follow on from what Beverly was saying, because I know sitting here that next year we're reviewing our nursing, midwifery and NA programs. So how soon do I need to start the conversation with you about the timelines? Because I think, again, it will be 3 programs that we're putting through and they all have the same start dates. So how soon am I going to start my conversations with you so that we can look at the calendars to set dates for events and stuff? Do you see what I'm saying? Because we used to know in the past that we would, if I wanted to do an approval event next year, then I had to tell you 9 months ahead. So I'm just thinking, is there going to be sort of a time frame in that perspective, and so that we can get the dates that we want for the event, so that we can start our programs when we want? Am I making sense?
Perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, obviously these conversations, the earlier they're had, the better. If you know where you're traveling, these conversations are had with primarily Natalie and Kirsty as lead nurse and lead midwife, and then I'm brought in for the scheduling aspect. My preference is always going to be that we have a sort of a forward understanding of what AEIs are looking to do, which I know can be slightly difficult and problematic as things change within HE generally, within this particular sector. Part of the sector. So I would suggest if conversations about what you're thinking of doing and you want some more information about when we would schedule these, I would ask you to start those as soon as you're ready. What I'll do in the normal chat function is just pop our QAA NMC email in there, and that's the email you can contact us on, and it will get flagged for myself, Natalie and Kirsty to pick up. But absolutely, if you've got an understanding of what you want to do, your proposed start date, I would suggest, yeah, let's have those conversations sooner, and we can start to then look at when that would be scheduled in and give you a clear understanding, especially if in the event then we do need a conjoint panel as part of a visit, you can start planning that internally as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thank you very much.
Do colleagues feel we've addressed all of the questions in the Q&A? And rolling chat? If so, I can start to sum up, unless anyone else would like to raise their hand and share something with us. Jackie. Please come in, Jackie, if you're able. Oh. Hopefully you're now able again.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, Jackie England, University of Salford. I actually went on the portal yesterday to have a bit of a, I won't say a dig around, but a review of what's in there. And I've noticed that on the profile page, there's been quite a list of our programme admin team has been added to the portal. Now, I can't find anybody who has added it from our internal staff. Has that been upgraded or updated by NMC or QAA at all? In which case, if it hasn't, then I will just have to go knocking on doors, because there's people on there that really don't need to be on there, and they're actually ending up saying, we don't know what this is asking for. Jackie, please, can you help? And I'm getting something like 13 emails from different people. Oh, look, Rachel's saying the same. Good.
Okay. So I will certainly undertake to look into this. I would imagine these are individuals who are connected to our wider system for your institution. So individuals who were previously using the HEI portal and are now using the AEI portal or My NMC online in order to do updates for student recommendations to the register, and that they have been processing things. So I would entirely imagine that that is the joining of our systems. As many colleagues know, we're starting to work on My NMC online, starting with that AEI portal where students are recommended to the register and the good health and character declarations are undertaken, and that needs to link through to the programmes so that, as Kirsty mentioned earlier, the programme titles being correct lead to the student being able to join the register at the end of the day. So I entirely believe that will have been us.
Right,
but
okay.
I will ask for an update to go in the
and if someone
next
could
month
come back to me as
EdQA
to what I
update.
need to do next, because they're all very confused about it, and it's making it quite difficult as to who's getting what. I've got one programme lead, 4 programme administrators, our current dean of school, as well as our official correspondent, myself, and our regulatory affairs manager. So it's just a little bit overkill. I don't want people fiddling.
Okay.
we
will look at that.
Some comments in the chat about that as well. Sophia just saying, Carol's commented that it's about the team that's been uploading students' registration since that process changed, and Melanie's commented on that as well. So it's mainly their registrars that have been added.
Okay, thank you very much. I will ask the team to put something in the EdQA update that goes out to OCs about that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Carol, I can see you've got your hand up. If I can unmute you.
Thank you, Natalie.
There we go.
2 things. One, Sophia, if when you speak to the registration team, it's just on the back of what Jackie was just saying, is it possible to ask them not to get, I don't know if this is even feasible in the link, the accreditation notifications? We had our ad hoc one go out the day after they got added, and I suddenly had 6 people forwarding me the ad hoc, which I won't lie was less fun to deal with than you'd imagine on a day, with everybody going, what do I do with this? And me going, please just ignore it. I don't know if it is possible in the link. It's just obviously our notifications now go to something like 24 people, and it's reducing all of them forwarding it to me on the same day to check I'm aware. But what I actually wanted to say was thank you very much for the major mod. It also makes a little more sense with some of the emails I think Natalie and I have been having in last week, which I still want to see Wednesday, but I think it makes a bit more sense. But from a timeline perspective for sort of business turnaround, that does make our lives an awful lot easier. I know, Sophia, you and I have had conversations about tender timings versus reality of accreditation. So it was more a thank you for the work on the major mods. I think that's really, really helpful, rather than any question.
Thank you.
And Natalie, I'll see you Wednesday.
I'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you. We'll certainly take the positive feedback. We appreciate that, Carol.
Naomi?
Hi, yeah, I'm Naomi from the University of Suffolk. Just a couple of questions, please. We have a number of major modifications going through at the minute, which we're doing by desk, correspondence desk space. Is that
Desk-based
just,
review.
yeah, so is that just for now and that won't now be a thing, or will that also be an option? It just wasn't presented, so I just wanted to check if that was just an interim before you introduced this new process.
I know me, I can pick up on that. It is exactly that it is an interim process. It was an addition, it was the process that we had through the original and the current published guidance. The anticipation going forward for modifications that it would either constitute a panel or an engagement. An event would be a similar equivalent to the desk-based. So your current reviews will remain as a desktop desk-based activity, but going forward will be replaced by either a panel or an engagement event.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. You kind of answered my second question, and that's it. Thank you very much.
I was just going to jump in, if I may, on the desktop major modifications. That's a bit of a legacy model, the desktop major modifications, and we weren't using them quite enough, in my personal opinion, because if you think of what we do, it's rarely solidly a paperwork exercise. It had to be some really very small changes for a purely desktop method to feel the comfortable, appropriate review method for that, because we require in the world of nursing and midwifery education so much stakeholder engagement for, of course, very good reasons. So the panel is not a conjoint panel with the university. It is a panel of visitors from the QAA who may be considering a number of very similar changes at one point in time. So they meet and discuss those, but it gives those visitors the opportunity for that direct engagement with either the programme team or the practice learning lead from your institution, which I personally feel is such a strong enhancement, because how much more context and understanding do we get when we hop on a Teams call and have a conversation as peers, as professionals in this space. And personally, I think it is going to reduce any risk of misunderstanding within there, any potentially unnecessary conditions, anything like that that we can do to make sure we have got a timely, robust understanding of the changes you want to make in order to get that recommendation into the NMC. For me, that is absolutely the goal and what we're trying to achieve with this partnership with the QAA. So hopefully, if you get allocated one of those two methods of an engagement event, or particularly a major modification panel, that you will see the real advantages of that, and that it will be feel timely and proportionate to you.
And just adding to that as well, we talked about the feedback that we've had, that we've based this on. You know, this includes feedback from our visitor team as well. And as Sophia's just highlighted, sometimes in those kind of desktop type events, we get feedback around, if I could just have a conversation with them, if I could just have a quick. And so it you know, hopefully it will be a really good addition to have that in there. Oh, Adam's spot his hand up.
There's just a couple of my Q&A chat's a bit slow to catch up, but there's a couple of things in there, and I don't know if anyone's responded, so I'll read it out from Christina about, will there be an opportunity to review evidence that is in Gateway 1 or 2? Which colleague wants to pick that up?
So, Sophia. There you go.
I was going to say, you're very welcome to, Natalie, but I may as well take accountability for that one. So Gateway 1 particularly is focused on your institutional approval to deliver NMC approved programmes. And so no, we will not be opening Gateway 1 or 2 unless we would like to make some significant changes to those standards. So you have gone through those gateways, and we believe that any changes you make to the policies or processes included within Gateway 1 and 2 are enhancements, and that is a part of your quality assurance internally that we believe and trust you to have. So if there is a change to your EDI policy, your safeguarding policy. We expect that your internal mechanisms will quality assure that and ensure that the NMC standards will be met by that document. We cannot on a continual basis provide that review and support to AEIs to say, yes, this changed policy will continue to meet our standards. So a big part of Gateway 1 is looking at your internal quality assurance mechanisms and ensuring that you have robust governance structures to, on a continual basis, update your policies and processes. You are expected to do that. It's healthy and expected that your regulations will evolve, but that you will ensure all of our standards continue to be met. If you found that they were not being, we would of course support you in that, but that is exceptional reporting territory. That's something at your institution may not be meeting our standards. And then, of course, there are aspects in Gateway 1 and 2 that will purely apply to your review. And I'm thinking, for example, you might have in Gateway 1 and 2 said, we do not have a midwifery programme. We don't need to ensure that student midwives are supported by registered midwives, for example. If you are making that sort of a change, you can do that through the linked standard within the programme standards. So within that Gateway 3 submission, you would do that there. So within every set of programme standards, there is ensure the programme will meet the standards framework for nursing and midwifery education. That is where you would put any updates that are relevant to the change in Gateway 1. You would put them against that standard, and likewise they ensure the programme meets the standards for student supervision and assessment standard. That is where you would put any contextualisation of the standards for student supervision and assessment, which is your Gateway 2, to that programme. So if it's a new midwifery programme, in that standard about supervision and assessment, you would be uploading what training you are providing for midwifery practice supervisors, how you're assuring that practice assessors for your new midwifery programme are aware of how your curriculum's structured, when students will be out on placement, what the expectations of the theoretical knowledge underpinning that student's ability at each level will be. You would put that within that linking standard between the Gateway 1 and Gateway 2. I hope that helps.
And Christina, we could discuss those links through the Part 3 programme standards with you at that screening meeting as well. So that's, again, all part of that front-loading process that we're really trying to make more robust. And as Sophia alluded to, we have been doing that, but that's more visible in our new handbook moving forward as well. There is a question from Carol Robinson around so I think we've just answered that question about reviewing the portal, but maybe some updated training sessions. So if you link in with us, Carol, we can signpost you to some of the guidance and training that we have. And rest assured that if you have anything scheduled with us, that we will offer continued support with that through your officer. Sophia.
Yeah, just to say, when you're starting a new Gateway 3 and a new Gateway 3 is opened for you, it will be pre-populated with the last changes you made to that programme. So if you are making changes to your nursing programme, for example, it will be pre-populated in each section of the QA link for you to see what you last submitted, so that you can either edit that information, or of course, if you need to, you can delete that content out and replace it with the current text that you wish to convey to the visitors. So that is yours. Your record, your gateway gets opened. It is a fresh set. You can amend that text, but if you have any questions or concerns about using the link, there I will feed it in that you want some more updated training sessions on the use of the link. We can certainly look at that in 2026, but also there is support there for you if you need it. Please do email QAlink@NMC email address, and Tamara or a member of the team will hop on and help you.
I don't have any further questions in the Q&A or the chat.
Can I start to sum up then? Is that all right, Natalie?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of information obviously been shared with colleagues today, and I thought it would be nice just to finish the session reflecting on the things that are really important to us at the NMC and what I see as the advantages and the real highlights of the presentations that you've given us today. And of course, first and foremost, thank you, Natalie, Kirsty and Adam, very publicly for doing this presentation today, but for all of the work that has gone in behind this with your officer team and your wider support at the QAA. We're extremely grateful for the work that you've put into this. So starting back at the beginning with what Natalie was saying, the handbooks being separated out into 4 handbooks. It'll not be a one-size-fits-all, which I believe is really important positive step, because that is going to give you clarity as to we're making a major modification. This is what we need to look at. Previously, I think we've had a bit of overlapping of information, and just being able to go to the one handbook that you know will have the answer to your questions, I think is really important. And I think, you know, the NMC will make AEIs aware when the changes that you mentioned come into your website, and when these handbooks have been published, we will write to all AEIs to let them know. And then Kirsty, you talked about the importance of clarity and strengthening the timeline, particularly post-event, for the regulatory decision-making process. And I think that's really important point today, because QA visitors do not make the decision. There is a whole other set of processes that start after the approval or major modification event. And you've also talked a lot about that enhanced screening and the consistent use of a decision matrix. That's fantastic, and I know from our pilots of this how useful that is, but I think the real strength of this system will be in the accessibility of yourself, Kirsty, and Natalie, using your expertise. I'm going to say to AEIs, this is not something that needs due regard. You don't have to just speak to a midwife or just speak to a nurse accordingly. It is the same processes, and either is more than capable of advising on which standards are in scope. But I think it's a real strength for Adam's team here to have both of those professions represented in this way. Adam particularly talked about the clarity of timelines as well, to promote that effective planning and to be more agile, which is something that we have really looked at in response to feedback. It's been front and centre to all of our decision-making processes. But Adam's also talked about these scheduling windows and this real clarity of this is when we are opening a scheduling window at the QAA, and therefore giving you that information about when your gateway will open and how that times through. But also the QAA may need to say, no, this process is not going to give us enough time. This would not be an appropriate start date. And while that might not be what you want to hear, it is indeed the kindest thing to sometimes say if there is not the appropriate opportunity for you to get the sign off. Then it's appropriate, fair, transparent that the QAA communicate that to you. Natalie, introduced us to student visitors, and it's something the QAA have been extremely passionate about and advocated for. So I'm really pleased that we're able to introduce that into some of our processes. For today's webinar, that is just for approvals, institutional approvals, and endorsements of programmes. So that is really important, but I think they're going to have a really interesting and insightful voice that they can bring to us. You also talked, Natalie, about the lens of the visitor, and that's something I'm very, very passionate about with my own personal background. But I feel that with the QAA being clear with you in the AEIs, it will strengthen the process for you and actually gives everyone a clearer understanding of what to expect. Particularly on that, I have asked the QA visitors to consistently introduce themselves and more clearly explain their role to each group of stakeholders that they meet and what that means for that group of stakeholders. It needs to be clear that they are not the NMC, they are there representing us, but there will or potentially are things that they may need to urgently escalate to us at the NMC, for example, safeguarding public safety, student safety issues, and that needs to be really front and centre during your review processes and your chair fully briefed on that. I'm really excited about the changes you will see to the report templates and that addition of things like area future monitoring going in there. That's great alongside those areas for good practice. But those enhanced report templates, I think, are going to really reduce repetition, add clarity, and enable universities to really clearly see how the visitors' findings, if necessary, do not meet that standard, the reasons why, and which standard that feedback specifically applies to. So those were really the key highlights for me from this presentation. I hope you took many more away from this as well, and we welcome your feedback as to how useful this has been. But unless we've had any more questions, I will draw us to a close. So has we received any further questions, colleagues?
There is one, sorry, yes.
Oh, sorry.
There is, yeah. So one more question from Rebecca. Will any of the changes bring any changes to the new programme monitoring?
So new programme monitoring is done directly by the NMC team. That is a supportive process, and I hope that is how you find it. But we always reflect back through new programme monitoring on the conditions that have been set by visitors, as well as recommendations. Areas for future monitoring will play into that, but no, we will be continuing with new programme monitoring as a supportive process for AEIs starting new programmes, or of course new AEIs. Is that all of the questions?
Yeah,
I believe so.
Well, all that remains from me before I hand back to the QAA in case they want to say anything is thank you very much indeed for your engagement today. Thank you for joining us. I'm so pleased that colleagues have enjoyed it and engaged with us today. And I thank you very much, and we look forward to rolling this out. Natalie, back to you.
Echo that. Thank you very much for your participation and engagement today. It's been lovely to be in the virtual room with you. And I have just popped a message in the chat to say that we're always here. If you've got any questions, please do reach out to us at NMC at QAA. So yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely afternoon.